In today's video, we're going to change the transmission filter kit on this 2004 GMC Sierra. I did some quick looking on ProDemand because I've done these jobs before where you had to remove the rear transmission mount, and in my procedure here it's just telling me to drain the oil and take off the pan. So with any luck, that's all we have to do here today. So luckily this truck has a drain plug. That's actually rare on transmissions to have a drain plug. So I'm just going to crack this free. I'm going to bring my telescopic pan up a little bit higher, and then I'm going to remove this plug. I'm going to keep an eye on what this looks like coming out. This is going to make a mess, I can tell already, because the gasket is stuck to the pan and not the plug. Not too bad. Before doing this job, and see there's my gasket right there, I'll have to make sure I get that it doesn't end up down the drain here or something. It is very nice when these things have a drain plug like that, so you're able to get rid of most of the oil before you take the pan off. Okay. All right, well, while that's going, I can get after taking the pan off. And the first thing it tells you to do is to take off the shifter linkage here. So I'm going to try that. I've ordered the transmission filter kit. It'll probably show up during this video. Piston ring in town here is fairly quick. Of course, with a GoPro on my head, I'm trying to not put it underneath the transmission fluid, because that'd be a nice way to treat the new camera. Let me keep all my bolts together here. Okay, so supposed to have the two bolts out for the shifter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop off the shifter lever. The shifter lever right here, you can usually just pry it off like that. And I'm taking a look up here. I'm a little confused at this second why that doesn't just come off. I guess those bolts weren't long enough to actually hold anything on from up above, so I think I've got some bolts from up above to take off yet. No worries. I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna get doing the pan here. So when you're taking off a transmission pan, there's a big mess up above you just waiting to happen. Those pans are pretty big, and there's still a lot of surface area up there with oil. So what you want to do is you're going to take out most of the bolts, but you're going to leave a couple easy ones left behind. I think the service manual told me to leave some at the back of the pan, and that's silly because the back of the pan seems to be the hardest bolts to get off on this thing. So I'm going to leave well, no, sorry, I'm gonna leave a couple back ones. I'm gonna drop down the front and drain out any residual, but because because of this truck having the drain plug, this shouldn't be too much of a mess. So far so good. These bolts have been very nice coming off. This electric ratchet from Snap-on makes this job a lot easier, and it's nice that you don't have any bolt issues so far. We've got this annoying exhaust shield in the way, but that's just, you know, to protect the transmission from the heat of the exhaust. It truly is a bad day at the office when these bolts start breaking on you. Happens from time to time. If you get one broken one, you can expect more usually. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this drain plug back in. There's more oil in the pan, but there's really no sense in draining anymore because I'm gonna take the pan off anyways, and I'm gonna clean it. So I'm gonna snug this up like I was gonna leave it, like I'm not gonna take it out again, just because you don't wanna forget that. Okay, now that that pan's out of my way, I can work at what is these back bolts that are a little bit tougher to get at. And then I guess I'll have to figure out what's going on the top of those things. I'm guessing that there's bolts up there. I'm gonna take out a couple more. I'm not at a point where this is gonna start coming off or anything yet, so I'm gonna take off a couple more. Some of these difficult ones here. I'll try to show the job here and see what we're up against. I'm just using the swivel socket so far, and I've been having some success. But I think my luck is starting to run out with that. So I'm gonna grab a 10mm wrench to get these ones over here. Now, what I don't know about this job, and I kind of hinted from the start, that some of these transmission pans don't come out with this cross member in place. Now, I did search our owner's manual or our service manual, and it didn't tell me I had to take off the pan, but it might just be withholding bad information from me so I don't get angry with it. It was one of the bigger design flaws in history when you put a filter that you can service in a transmission, and then what's in your way is something that doesn't matter. This lip, they could have definitely put that somewhere else. So yes, I'm criticizing the engineers. Who knew a mechanic would criticize engineers? But they did this for quite a few years and didn't really fix it. So yeah, I could be a little bitter about that. Yeah, I guess that's just the way I'm gonna do it. So 2 fingers. The threads are in good shape, so they're coming off easily. But sometimes you just got to sit here and persevere through. I'm hoping at this point, if I haven't already fast forwarded this video for you, you're finding a way to skip through this, or maybe you want to live what is the whole experience of this with me, which I appreciate. I really do, that you have the patience to do these jobs and watch the video afterwards too. Okay, so That's the second last bolt. If I didn't have a drain plug on this one, I would want to leave a couple bolts on just one side of the pan and then break the gasket free and drop it down on one side, tilt the pan down and drain the oil out first, because there's a lot of oil up above my head. Looks like my filter kit just got here. I ordered it right before I started this video, so again, good on you, Piston Ring, to rip down and do that for us. Oh, I have 3 bolts left. Okay, I'm gonna get this hard to reach bolt out. I usually do the hard ones first, but I got so excited when I saw my electric ratchet this morning that I just have to get after it, make some noise and make some vroom vrooms, duggas and all that good stuff. Okay, like I said before, hey, it looks like I've got a filter kit there. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. This linkage tells you to take off first, and I thought I was going to take it off with those lower bolts, but I was wrong. Oh my goodness, can you believe it? So I'm thinking that there's something up above here. I'm trying a 13 wrench and it feels too small to fit whatever I feel up there. $14, $15, what? It's too big for whatever's up there. Huh. Well, maybe it's just stuck, because I've got the bolts out already. I'm gonna use GoPro's technology here to help me out. And I apologize for this, but I am going to use GoPro's technology to help me out. Okay, so I'm going to take my phone and now I need a light. This is getting difficult. This is tricky. You can see that bolt that I'm trying to get out. Looks like it has a hex or a torque head on it. Oh yeah, Torx. Yeah. Thanks a lot, engineers at GM. First, you know what, I'll appreciate you guys, and thanks for the GoPro there, that was awesome. If you make me to take off this bracket and do a Torx bit from up there, I'm gonna be salty. I'm gonna be a tad salty. I'll tell you that right now. Okay. We're gonna grab a bunch of our Torx bits that are all out of place here. I saw it was Torx. I'm gonna estimate it was around a 40 or something. I don't know what it was. Oh, what was it? Whoa, T40. Good guess. All right. They wanted to make this job a little bit. So far, it's been fairly easy, so I can't complain too much. But this is in a little bit of a spot. I've got the vehicle really high on the hoist to see this video, but look at those bolts. They are coming out nicely on this transmission, I'll have to say. Good clean threads. Okay, now this one's going to be a little bit trickier. I said I always do the hard ones first, but it's a Monday and I guess I just was craving an easy job this morning. This flex head ratchet looks like it's a necessity with this job. And this T40 is pretty important. So if you're going to start this job, just make sure you have those things in your arsenal. I'm having a little bit of a problem here though. There feels like there's a whole bunch of there might be some dirt and some grease built up in the Torx head of that bolt. So something way up above my head that I cannot see. This is just the regular for the mechanics out there. I'm gonna put my pick in there and clean out some junk. There we go. I'm gonna lower the hoist just a hair because I am starting to struggle a bit. All right, flat-footed. Clean head of a bolt. I think should be able to pull this job off now. Well, that one's a little tighter. There we go. Got it to move. There we go. Now that shifter linkage is all loose like we were supposed to do in the first place. My hand's stuck in the drive shaft. We'll get that shifter linkage out of the way on this truck. All right, we're getting pretty close here to finding out whether this is going to be a good job or a bad job. Because again, I'm still a little bit dreading the fact that I might not be able to get this pan out. All right, last bolt is right here. So this is when I'm gonna have to be ready to catch this thing if it comes down, which it is. So the pan's not heavy. I can hold it up with one hand, put that last bolt down with the other. And what I was hoping was there was a chance that this would come out. Oh, it's tight. I wouldn't mind showing this. The pan's tight up against the exhaust there, but it's really, really close to coming out. So I actually think it will come out. I'm gonna bend the heat shield down just a hair. If it doesn't come out by that much, I'm gonna be taking a hammer to my exhaust probably. Okay, I'm gonna try putting that. Haha. Haha, funny. Funny, GM. You're really funny. Really, really funny. Boy, that's close. Boy, that's close. Like, it is literally just scraping to come out. Oh boy. Funny, 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 GM. See that lip of the bracket? What does that do? What does that do? Sawzall's gonna be going in there soon is what's gonna be happening, but no, I won't lose my cool. Well, this bracket here is the rear transmission mount. It has 2 bolts. Where are my transmission mount bolts? They're stuffed with hay. Okay, well, it looks like I have a little bit of work to do. I got to take out the hay. I'll impact these off and I'll come back to you with a pan off. I don't think you need to see this part unless I can wiggle it out of there, but it looks like it's stuck. Wonderful. See you in a bit. Okay, I'm back with you. It's really too bad I took the GoPro off. I thought, well, I'm gonna charge it and just get it off my head while I take off this bracketry or whatever. I thought it was maybe not super important for everybody at home to see this bracket coming off, but you know, you always give things one more last try. So when I left you, the transmission pan was kind of wedged in there and it didn't look like it was gonna go. With just a flat screwdriver, I gave that a little bit of a bend and pried it down, but of course it came shooting out of there like a rocket. I don't know what was in behind that thing, but it did what, you know, I would normally go on a day in the shop here at Crocus with my students, go, yep, that's what I was expecting, to whatever. So it's not like I sat here and told you how clean of a job I was going to do. And normally I do. I try to take pride in not making a mess or whatever, and this is how you do this, but, well, I'm owning it now. I got it out. And do you need to take out that rear bracket to do this job? I guess the answer is no. I'd still be curious just to nip that out of there, to be honest, but being a educational video, I don't cut things out of people's vehicles, but this is sitting here being my vehicle and I can see no purpose for it, so I don't know. We'll see. I don't think I'll have a problem putting it together now. So just to show you what's inside, this is one of your good gaskets. It's kind of a solid gasket. It's not flimsy. This is usually what we would call a reusable gasket. It has an O-ring all the way around, and I'm going to clean this up and take a look at it. The new transmission filter kit does come with a gasket, but not usually as good a quality as these reusables, to be honest. And then there's the look of the transmission up there, and here's the filter. So the filter, got to stand in the transmission fluid over here. I'm gonna have my drain pan in place because the filter could be holding some. You're gonna grab a hold of the filter, and if there's no fasteners, then you're just gonna wiggle it back and forth and pull down. So there's my filter. Got a little bit of oil dripping there. I can take a look inside, and all I should see is some dirty looking paper. All the junk's gonna be caught on this side, up in that housing. If I was having some transmission problems, I might be interested in cutting that open and taking a look to see what type of material I have in there. Anyways, this is the hole where the filter came out of. And this seal that's up here, this is a seal, this is a rubber seal that holds that in place. That comes out, and the new filter kit comes with a new seal as well. So if you've never seen a transmission from below before, this is the valve body that directs the oil flows around my transmission for shifting purposes and stuff. And what you'll notice is transmissions are always usually very clean inside. Transmission oil has good cleaning agents in it. And yeah, there's wires and things in there, and you probably like, really, wires in the oil? And yes, that's the way transmissions are built. They're all like this. Okay, well, I've got myself quite the mess to clean up. I'm glad I did that, you know, and I'm glad I'm gonna post this on YouTube, you know, because we've all done this. We've all done it. And I haven't done this for a while, where I've dropped the pan and made a huge mess, but I did it, and I'm gonna own up to it. Okay, Autotech man. Oh, thank you. You had a rag for me. It's very handy. So over to the gasket. I ordered it. It came in. Just gonna confirm that this is the right filter and gasket before I go ahead and open up the plastic, so I can return this if I need to. It looks like the right filter. Here's the new seal that goes in, the new filter, and then the new pan gasket. Usually all you have to do with most transmissions is confirm that you have the right gasket. But there are a lot of transmissions that have different sump depths and things like that, and this GM is no exception. So I'm just going to take a peek. I haven't decided if I'm using this new filter or not. Okay, something looks up, so I think I must be out by flipping it. All right, this appears to be the right gasket. All the bolt holes line up. We're just gonna grab that filter and confirm it as well. Here I am now, trying not to make a mess now, right? Like, oh my goodness, there was oil in there. All right. Put my filter here. Make sure that tube has the same angle and the same height. It appears to have the exact same height and the exact same shape. So it looks like I've ordered the right one here. I'm gonna just cover this up, bring this back and put it back in the tub. Here, probably have a cleaner rag on top here. Well, we've made a proper mess here today. One last thing to do is just to inspect our pan. So the pan was dry coming in. I'm not worried about its mounting surface or anything like that. It must be good. If I move all the fluid out of the way over here, what you're gonna see is that there's something right here, and that's a magnet. And the magnet on this one doesn't seem to have a whole bunch of metallic debris, but it has some. You can see as I rub this off that I'm getting kind of muddy on the end of my fingers. If we had excessive debris in there, and maybe you need to do a couple jobs before you're going to notice what excessive is, but if you can barely recognize the shape of that magnet, you should start to assume that you have some transmission problems coming or developing. I'm doing this strictly for educational purposes and regular maintenance. I haven't noticed anything ever with this transmission. No harsh shifting or no slipping or anything like that. So this is strictly just to do some preventative maintenance. All right, I'm gonna go off camera. Maybe something else will be funny as soon as I go off camera, but I'm gonna take this over to our solvent tank and clean it up, make this pan spotless. I'm going to clean the surface up there, and then when I come back, we'll be putting this back together and finishing up this job. Okay, so we had the pan out in the last step, and I'm back with you now with a clean pan. I took this to our solvent tank and washed it out. I put it in I just rinsed it with water after it came out of the solvent tank, and then I used compressed air to blow dry it and just a rag to finish up wiping it down. So hopefully you can have a facility to do that with. You always hear these stories of mechanics saying that they, you know, put the transmission in the bathtub to wash it, and my advice is just make sure that your wife's not in the bathtub when you do this, or you'll be single like myself. Here's the magnet that came out of the bottom, and I've cleaned it all up now. I'm gonna put the magnet back in its magnet location. So usually the magnet has a spot for it, and then these little baffles to help have like the metal parts run through here, and then the magnet will pick them up. I've decided to reuse this reusable gasket, as I call it, reusable gasket. It's not flimsy. This one's made out of plastic with a rubber O-ring all the way around, and this one was spotless when I took it apart, and yeah, I like this one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this little seal out of that transmission there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into our room here, and what I'm going to look for is a slide hammer to do this job. The slide hammer with a little hook on it is a pretty good way to get this job done. So here's my trusty slide hammer here. We left the CV axle puller on it. So actually my students would have used this last. So what I'm going to do is take the smaller hook, I believe. I'm hoping that this hook fits. You can just use a screwdriver and things to pry these things out of there, but I'm not a big fan of making scratches where I don't need to. So I think the slide hammer is just going to do a better job. I'm going to try to give you the best view that I can here with the light. So the old seal is up in there. Gonna just tap that out. I'm not really against any way that you get this out, but I would suggest changing it, because I'm guessing that if I don't seal very well against the plastic, which I bet this one did, it probably sealed just fine, it wouldn't be super healthy for your transmission to be not pulling the oil through the sump, or losing prime or silly things like that. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that this is the right filter. I'm going to take it out of its case here to get a hold of this seal here. What I'm going to use to install it is just an impact socket and a hammer. I'm going to line it up the best I can. Now let's remember that we're hammering on a transmission housing, so maybe a little bit of a soft touch is good, but if you've put in a lot of seals just with a hammer and a socket before, you'll know that sharp hits are necessary too, just so it goes in straight, and then when it finds its home, just light taps. Yep, looks good. Looks good. I'm going to use a little bit of transmission fluid to lubricate that rubber when this goes in. A lot of people probably use grease or lots of different things. If you're ever unsure what you're going to use, just remember that whatever the oil is that part is submerged in, it's usually the safest bet. Motor oil for oil filters, and if it was a power steering seal, could you use some power steering fluid, right? Gonna push the filter and wiggle it, and the filter has like little locators up above that it kind of fits into. You'll know when it's in the right spot, you'll feel it. Gonna tap it up, and the pan holds that on. So that's why it's important that you have the right pan or the right filter for your application. Okay, we're pretty much ready to throw this pan up. We just have to do some engineering here, and I could have hid all this from the YouTube community and my students, because at some point you have to figure out like what type of mechanic you want to be. You know, all mechanics know an easier way sometimes. You know, you look at the job, you see what you're doing, and you're like, boy, I could sure save a lot of time if I did blah. So I'm gonna share that this is what I'm doing. This bracketry that was in my way for putting the pan in, and not to mention this was in the way quite a bit too, but I think I'll get it in. I'm gonna bend it out of the way. That's what decision I've made, and some people are gonna appreciate that because maybe it's honesty, or maybe it's just showing an easier way. And then some people aren't going to appreciate it. They're saying, you know, you should have taken that off. Everybody has their own opinion on this, and I did it this way today. It's no wrong way or sketchy way, it's a way. These things get done all the time, they're just not always on video when they do it. I could lie to you and just say the pan just comes out, and then you could try to mimic me or follow me, and then you're like, well, that doesn't work, how did you get that out? So I'm not doing that here to you today. What I'm doing now is just cleaning up the surface up above, and I notice a whole bunch of little gravel and stuff in the Prindle switch mount here, and you can see that it comes out pretty easily. So the reason I'm doing this is that if I put the pan up here and I get a little rough with it and knock some of this gravel into it, then I've got a problem too. So anything that's loose is going to come out. Take out all this loose stuff here. None of this is falling into the transmission unless it has some weird way of doing corners that I haven't seen yet. It's falling straight down into my drain pan. Another step that might often be done off camera, but I had decided when I looked at this that if people didn't know, they could be putting rocks down into their drain pan. Okay, well, that cleaned up pretty good. No harm, no foul. Just make sure that none of that debris is in there. Now these ones I can't seem to move, so I'm going to leave them alone. All right, well, let's get this started. I'm going to just take a peek at ProDemand here. Oil pan to transmission case is 97 inch-pounds for torque. We are going to torque this today. I'm going to grab my shiny new clean pan, and I'm going to be careful not to knock anything out. By this point, I'm going to take out the transmission drainer There's going to be a few drops here and there. Transmission's almost never really stopped draining ever, but we're going to just toss that off to the side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this reusable gasket of mine. It's kind of a stiff gasket, and I'm going to put it up on the transmission so it's held in place. Don't make the rookie mistake of not checking to see if the bolt holes line up, because you could have this gasket upside down or something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that shift lever there hold it in place, because I remember how tight this pan was to get in. So when I got the pan out, it was wedged up there and then put in here. Oop. Just don't make magnets strong enough on lights. Maybe if somebody's watching this, they can source me a new awesome light that does not fall every time you look at it. There we go. And that's why we had to make sure that we knocked out all that gravel, because we had to kind of bang it in there. If you haven't done these GM pans before, I haven't done tons of them, but if you haven't done them before, you might just think, well, the pan just goes straight up. Why did you have to get so rough with it? And yeah, no, it doesn't. I'm gonna place some bolts in. Kind of in and around. And then I'm gonna use that electric ratchet, that snap-on ratchet again, to run these up. A dugga-duggas. How many dugga-duggas is 97 inch-pounds? Well, that's not very many. So we will be careful with it. Luckily the electric ratchets, they're not very powerful. And they're slow, so you have the ability to slow right down when you're tightening things. Just make sure you're not over tightening these. Let's remember that this gasket is made out of plastic. And I don't know that that really matters being sandwiched in like a, what is a light tin oil pan or not. But I don't want to find out the hard way. Make sure that you don't tighten down any of the bolts all the way until you have every last bolt in. That way the pan will move. It'll move around so you can get all the bolts in. Okay. Well, I have this bracketry to go in, and I have all these bolts to put in and snug, but this isn't very technical here. This is pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to you with this pan all in and torqued. What I'm going to do while I'm right here is that after I get all of these snug, I'm going to torque the pan starting at one bolt and going clockwise around the whole thing, and I'm going to keep going around. That's how you do oil pans. It's not like some type of cross pattern or whatever, because as it squishes the gasket in there, you could have like this little wave going. So the best way to not damage any gaskets is to just start and go all the way around. And when you get back to your starting bolt, go around again probably. You might get halfway around before you realize that, then you'll see that they're all tight. I think I'm gonna leave my new modification in place for the next person that does this. I don't imagine I'll own this truck forever. and I'll come back to you after my bracketry's back in and my pan's tight, and we'll put some oil in this thing. Okay, let's take a look underneath here. We've come back after I've been off camera doing a little bit of work. I had to put this bracket back on the top and snug down those Torx bolts. I put in all the oil pan bolts, and I went around probably 1.5 times before I started to get torqued bolts again. So just be aware that when you do a pan like this, chances are when you go around once, this bolt's not going to be tight. Maybe not this one. I think when I got to about here it was tight. The shifter linkage that I had just popped off before, you just squeeze it back together. Pair of pliers are sometimes needed, and like I showed you before, my modification is going to stay just like that. Yeah, so that's nice and clean. It's going to seal up well, I believe. What I've decided to do was I used the hoist, the 4-post hoist, to lift my rear tires off the ground. And the reason that I did that is we're gonna need to take a vehicle for a test drive after a transmission filter kit. And I wanted to share that part of the experience in the video, but without going for the drive. So I'm just gonna do it here in the shop on the hoist, and tried to make it about as level as I can. I just wanted to recap the tools that were used for this job, or that we're going to need for this job. I left the compressed air hose here for drying the oil pan. You're going to need some way to clean an oil pan if you take it off, but if all you have is diesel fuel or something at home, that'll work very well. This electric ratchet with the swivel was fairly made my job a lot easier here, but if you had any type of 10mm socket, you'd probably get this done, with the exception of the 2 bolts that were at the back of the pan were pretty tricky. You're gonna have to use that 10mm combination wrench, sure, one right here, to get them out. There was really no other way to get them out. Then after your pan was out with a little bit of bending and such, we had to clean up the pan, pop off the filter, and then use something to pop that old seal out of there. Now you can just use a screwdriver, but I try not to, because it doesn't leave screwdriver marks in the aluminum and stuff like that. And then just, you know, putting this thing back together, having a pair of pliers to pop that linkage back together underneath. We had a 40 Torx socket for the linkage and a 15mm for the drain plug. I've got my oil sitting here. I've looked up on ProDemand, which is our service manual, how much oil this thing's supposed to do for what it's supposed to take for what's called a drain and refill. It's 4.7 liters. So I've got it all torqued and buttoned up underneath. What we need to do is fill this thing with oil and take care of that. The filling of oil can be a little bit of a tricky step, actually, and I'll show you what our challenge is here. We're gonna probably come up against it. Sorry, as I just double checked that my air hose isn't underneath the hoist. I guess I've done this a few times. I knew it was gonna be under the hoist. If something can get underneath the hoist, most likely it's going to. Okay, I lifted up my truck so it was sitting here about as level as it is when it's sitting on the ground, because as I'm going to be checking oil with a dipstick, you're going to have to make sure that it's level. Makes the job a little higher here, but I am nice and tall, so I should be able to handle this. I'm going to take out the dipstick, put it here, and it was really hard to gauge how much oil I got out of this thing because I didn't really catch it in a measurable container. And then of course I did the big disaster spill all over the floor on top of that. So I'm gonna just do this, whatever. It's not trial and error, but it is. I don't know how much oil to put in it. Gonna try my best not to make any spills here. I'm underneath my hood here and I don't want to have any spills. So what I'm going to do is take this flexible funnel that you can get at any auto parts store, and can I get you a better view with that? Sure. Make sure it's clean inside, and then this oil jug won't really pour anything out until I get it up here. It has a valve on there, and I'm going to go in nice and slow. I don't know if you can see that. I doubt you can. But when you're pouring oil in any surface, you shouldn't just fill it up so it covers the funnel. So you can see that I haven't filled that hole completely, and the reason that I don't do that is it allows air to go in, and this thing's going to fill up a lot faster with me pouring slower, if that makes any sense. And I don't really care that this thing says it's going to take 4.7 liters. I like to start at about 3.5 for just about every transmission filter kit that I do on these trucks. So I'm going to leave a couple liters to spare here. And keep going, because after we overfill, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, except in this truck I do have a drain plug, so that makes my life easier. I am a big advocate for drain plugs and transmissions. We could have done this job a little bit more often and not done the filter, but just changed the oil, let's say at a regular oil change interval. And I probably will do that. I've only had this truck for half a year or so. I'm probably going to do that from now on. I changed that filter now. I know that my truck at 300,000 kilometers had a new filter, so I'm pretty happy about that. I don't know if it ever had one before that. I would be surprised if this is the original transmission, actually. Judging by how little debris was in my pan and on that magnet, I actually think this transmission has been changed with a rebuild or something. Okay, I'm gonna start by putting in some oil. How much? Well, I had 4.7 in there. I have under 2. So I've started by putting about 3 liters of oil in this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start this thing up, and I'm going to cycle it through some gears and see if it drives my wheels. If it doesn't drive my wheels, then I'm going to stop and put more oil in it. So we'll jump up into the truck. Oh. Got some nice country music playing away. We're gonna start. And like every oil change and such, I'm gonna look for leaks, but what I'm gonna first do is put my foot on the brake and see if it feels like it's going into gear. Okay, it went into reverse. I'm gonna let it drive the wheels in reverse. Might even rev it up just to see, is that normal? Yeah, it's shifting. Not shifting, it's in reverse normal. It revs up when I rev up the engine. Foot on the brake. Go into neutral. Be very patient when you're up in the air going from reverse to drive, because sometimes your wheels aren't done moving in reverse and then you jam it into drive and it really bangs everything. It's not good for it. Then I'm gonna go for a test drive here and drive. There's first gear. Second gear, third gear. I don't know if I'm getting into fourth or not. Maybe I was in fourth. It happens pretty quick because there's no load on the wheels. I'm gonna throw it into neutral. Foot on the brake. Be patient before you throw it into park. quite often you'll throw it into park and you'll hear your parking pole banging away because you didn't let your wheels stop turning. Okay, now I'm going to check my oil. And if you know anything about automatic transmissions, is that you check your oil with the engine running. I've got these little marks on my dipstick. Over here by my thumbnail, there's a low and a high for cold. Here, there's a low and a high for hot. My transmission's cold right now. It might be warm out. I might have drove it here, but it hasn't been doing anything as of late, and it just got an oil change. So I'm gonna check the oil. Now the problem is that the dipstick tube just had all that oil going down it. So this little ball here is supposed to stop this part from touching the tube and picking up all the oil. How good of a job does it do? Well, let's see. Try not to brush it up against the tube too much, but I'm gonna push it all the way in, all the way out. I'm gonna use the light of the truck to help me out here. Now I can't tell for sure if that's oil here at the end of the dipstick or if that's just that ball pushing on the edge of the dipstick tube, but that's where it actually seems to be. So now I'm gonna add some oil to this. I could shut off the truck, but I don't see that there's any real reason other than if there was a danger issue being underneath the hood, and I don't see there being one. Famous last words. If something happens, I won't post this video. I don't like being wrong or dumping oil all over the place, so I'm gonna protect my funnel. Oh, got some on my ignition coil. This would be the funny part when I'm drying off my oil on the ignition coil, that I get a little zap. Okay, I'm gonna put in some more oil. How much? I don't know. I'm gonna try to put in about 1 liter. Again, I try not to ever completely cover the hole, because that's when you'll get like a burp and some feedback and an angry vehicle with oil all over it. You might ask me, why is it not just that 4.7 like the manual said? And it might be, I don't know. Transmissions are that anomaly where you're gonna get oil out for sure. You're gonna get what's in the pan, but you definitely don't get what's in the torque converter. And I didn't do a flush of my cooler today. I'm just gonna put this in the drain pan. So I didn't flush my cooler, so I didn't get oil out of it. You just never know exactly how much you're gonna get out of these things, from my experience anyways. I don't believe I need to go for another test drive. I shifted through all the gears fairly well. But what I don't want to have is like some void inside my transmission, or some air taking up spot where oil needs to be. So I'm gonna go through the gears again. And I actually know this thing runs at 2,000 RPMs at 100 kilometers per hour. Okay. So I was definitely in fourth. I still recommend, even if you do this in the shop, that depends on where you work, you might be able to get someone else to drive the vehicle or go for a drive, warm it up good, you know, shift through all the gears, and then we'll recheck that settled oil. With transmissions, I don't have much trouble with them usually, but sometimes when you fill them up and go out on a test drive and come back, it needs another half liter. It needs something to be topped up. Okay, again, I'm still running. I haven't changed that. Dipstick all the way in. Pull it out, and then I'm going to use the light of the truck again. I always read the lowest side of the dipstick. So the lowest side of the dipstick is here, right where that curl on the ball is, which happens to be right where my cold line is on this silly dipstick. It's too bad that it's so close to the bottom that you can hardly tell. So I'm really close from what it looks like. I want to finish this up. I could just tell you just keep doing this step until you're done, but I do want to finish this job up. Show some patience. Again, I cover the end of my funnel. Ah, I fall. Put it in there. Now this should be pretty close. And I don't really have a whole lot of oil left. It has been my experience that most people tend to overfill. And I don't know that a little bit overfull on a transmission, I don't think it really does anything, to be honest. Where in a motor, you don't want to overfill because your crankshaft is going to churn up all that engine oil like a set of egg beaters. A transmission really doesn't have that same worry, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't want to overfill, but a little bit overfull, I've never seen anybody go drain it out unless they were really overfull. I'm not going to go through my gears this time, and I think I'm probably going to call this done because everything's going well. I'd like that oil to settle before I say it's good. So whether it just settles by sitting here, but I'll take it for a test drive before it leaves with the customer today, which is me, and make sure it's good. All right, I can clearly see now. If you look on this side, it's a good lesson for you. It looks like the oil is way up to here. When I flip to the other side, the oil is just to here, which is in that hot line now. So it looks like I'm full or just a tad over full. But what you need to learn is that when you read two sides of a dipstick, always read the lower side. So this side was reading here, this side was reading way up here. That's a false reading from oil just being rubbed on the dipstick through the dipstick tube. Okay, my oil's nice and bright red now. I have to just finish up by reminding you that I didn't get all the oil out. There was oil in the transmission lines coming up to the cooler that's at the front. So that oil stayed in the transmission, and the torque converter holds quite a bit as well. So I didn't get that out. But that's what we do. Automatic transmission fluid overhaul, 10.6 liters, drain and fill 4.7. And I didn't put all that 4.7 in. I held about half a liter back, and you can see that I'm a tad over full, just like what I say most people do. But I have a new filter in there in case my paper element was getting kind of dirty. I have 4.7 liters or 4 liters of brand new oil, and all the old oil is out. I didn't see anything with this job other than when I started. I'll have to say I didn't have the most red transmission fluid, and it didn't smell burnt, but it was getting a little brownish. It was reddish brownish or whatever. So I work my truck pretty hard some days. Sometimes I pull more than what I'm supposed to, and those are the things that cause damage to trucks. So if you have yourself a half ton and you're pulling a camper, or you have a 3/4 ton and you're pulling a camper and bigger than that, then put this service on something that you need to do, or you need to bring it to a shop to get done. Because I guarantee you that, you know what I did today is probably gonna prolong the life of this transmission now in this truck. Alrighty. Well, we're done. This thing can go to the customer, and that's an automatic transmission filter changed on this truck.